Good evening, everyone. Let's make sure my volume is up. Good evening, everyone. If you're just now joining, I'm going to drink a little bit of my water because my throat. Sorry. this gets just keeps bothering me. So I don't know how long I'll be able to remain on this live, but my intention is to be on here for at least an hour. If you're just now joining, I'm really happy that you are able to join us tonight on Midwife Chronicles, our trials, our triumphs. And tonight, my focus was on, I want to make sure that I cover all the points and areas that I wanted to share tonight was on our midwife journey and some of the areas that are not taught in school, the realities of midwifery, what they don't teach you in school, which we do in A Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training. In fact, I just posted on our social media platforms. I believe I got to all of them, but if not, you'll see them within the next 24 to 48 hours. So good evening. I am Midwife Sakina Oyuhuru, and I am a certified nurse midwife. I'm also what's known as a certified professional midwife. I hold a master's degree in midwifery and extremely passionate about the work that I have been doing for the last 30 years. And some of you, unbeknown to a lot of people, I've been practicing the art of midwifery before some of you've been born or even thought of embarking on this journey. A lot of people don't know that I've been in the medical field for quite some time, initially as a physician assistant. So I hold a strong fund of knowledge in medicine, uh, particularly around women's health, reproductive health, adolescent medicine, and pediatric. It was my focus. So, just to give you some context, some background information, um, and I am really, I want to say, marketing to anyone who's interested in embarking on this journey as a midwife. And, some of our lives have been about what to look for when you're looking for a school, how to know which journey to embark on. And what I'm speaking to is, do I want to become a certified nurse midwife? Am I interested in practicing as a traditional midwife, or am I interested in becoming a certified professional midwife? And a lot of those kinds of decisions, excuse me, are based around where you will practice, what are you married to, what is your value system around, or what are you aligned with culturally, or around your perspective of birth, around birth or pregnancy or reproductive health. Sometimes I get calls, inquiries, and emails from individuals who are not sure. And so, what I say to them is maybe sit still, think about what led you here, think about your own journey, think about your own birth. And sometimes through those kinds of meditative moments, you discover exactly what you're wedded to and what you're passionate about. And that will help you decide which pathway to choose. Um, and tonight I wanted to get a little bit into some of the things that you probably would not learn in a traditional based midwifery school. And I'm not knocking it. Let me just come out the gate making that statement, because I know some people will say, why were you talking about um, the traditional midwifery school and how that doesn't, but because I know I came from that educational background. I was taught in the traditional midwifery program. Um, and I also went to nursing school. And I know without a doubt, one of the things they do not focus on is the emotional and mental, as well as physical demands of midwifery, a tremendous amount. And I just wanted to go over a couple of those, I want to say, areas that I feel are lacking. My program focuses on that emotional demand and requirement. And we try our best to train you to develop the tools that will help you navigate those kinds of spaces and transactions that will happen, that you will experience as a birth worker, midwife. So it's more than just catching a baby. And we like to talk about all of those areas that will impact your emotional and mental well-being, because you will create bonds and relationships with clients. Excuse me. And you will get really close with some of them. And you will experience that beauty of the birth, but you also might experience some heartbreak and loss from some complication that might have occurred, or a client that you've been with since 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 16 weeks. And then in the end, during the labor process or close to it, you now have to transfer them to a hospital. And that kind of change, and dramatic change, it is dramatic because you've planned for this for almost a year. They have planned for it from almost a year if you've been with this client. And so there is some mourning that goes on. There is a loss. And so it takes time to process that. And a lot of times you don't have time to process it in that moment. So we like to talk a lot about it, normalize it, and make sure that you develop some tools that can help you navigate those kinds of, I want to say, challenging spaces. It could be some heartbreak with that, and so you have to process it yourself as the practitioner, but also provide the space so that the couple can, or the laboring person can. So that's important to know and to learn about, so that you will develop the right tools and supportive, I want to say, systems that can help you get through those challenging times. So that's emotional and also mentally. We sometimes experience what we call burnout. And burnout is not always physical, but it can be, most times it's related to emotional and mental burnout. This kind of, I want to say, work that we do, you can't and turn it off. It doesn't go like, okay, we turn the computer off, we, walk away from the desk, and that's it. You just focus on your family and your child and the dinner, and no, that just doesn't happen. When you practice as a midwife, I don't really think it goes on. Now you have to carve out some time that you, of course, create for family time, for your, you know, pouring back into yourself. Yes, but we just like to really give a reality based picture of what it really is like being a midwife. It's very, very hard to turn off. Because you're always on. You're always on call. The phone can ring anytime. It can ring while you're at a birthday party for your nephew, or a surprise baby shower for your niece or your sister. You can get a phone call at 2 or 3 a.m., when you have personal time with your partner. So that's what I mean. And so that pulling and strain causes stress, sometimes anxiety, and it wears on you. So we like to speak about that, in a way that helps our students create better ways of coping, because they don't talk enough about that in the traditional setting. So those are some of the things that we offer our students in our training program, A Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training. By the way, if you go to our website, and I'll put it in the chat, and If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Um, a Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training, you can apply if you're interested. We are taking applications now for 2026. Just trying to make sure that I spelled it right, and I didn't. Left out a A. It's a really long. I gotta think of another shortened website. Here's where you can find our application. Um, and you can submit the application as well as your 2 letters of recommendation as well as your essay. So we were talking tonight a little bit about the areas that are really not spoken of enough, and I was speaking to the emotional labor or mental demands of being a midwife, and also the physical demands. As a midwife, we pull long hours in, and that's just for one client. So it's really important to understand that it's being on call 24/7. And why am I saying that? Well, in the month of, let's say, we in February, you might have 6 clients, you might have 4, even as small as 2, and they're due at, let's say, February 5th, and one was due at February 9th. You're still now on call for 2 people. And then as the weeks go by, in the month of February, 2 more people are on call, and those February 5th and February 9th still didn't birth. And now you're on call for 4 people. That plays on you mentally. And also, if you do go into labor with the February 9th one, and then even before you lay your head down, the February 5th one calls. So the physical demands and the long hours, missed meals, or eating when you shouldn't be eating because you just came in from birth and you're so super hungry. So you're eating at 4 a.m. or you're eating at midnight. Oh, and sleep deprivation, a lot of it. And sometimes that wears and tears on you. When you don't have any clients, it's hard for you to go to sleep because you've been up so long with the other clients that your body just is out of rhythm. The circadian rhythm is off. So it's important to talk a lot about the physical demands, the emotional demands, and the mental demands, and really bring attention to it. Not only talk about it, normalize it, even though it's abnormal, it's a normal abnormality of our profession, but finding the tools and necessary resources to support you on your journey. And burnout is real. It is real. It can happen quite often. At times when you really are unexpectedly burnout, meaning you just overworked because it's hard again to turn off your provider, professional status. And it's hard when you need to check labs and you didn't check them before. Oh my God, I forgot to write the note. Oh goodness, I forgot to call this client back. Oh, I have to refer her for an ultrasound. So it's always something to do. I didn't do my notes for the labor. So burnout is a reality. And so you have to be conscious of how you create systems to prevent burnout and also to develop a routine for self care. So it's all about setting boundaries too, and self care kind of rituals so that you're consciously um, making sure that you carve out time for yourself as well as for family. And also recognizing the signs and symptoms of fatigue is very, 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 very important. So I want to say for me, I remember once before, I think my mom was staying with me for, I don't know, for the weekend or something like that. That was in New Jersey. I remember that. And I actually told my mom to take my phone because I was so tired from being up so long with a client. And I was like, Mom, just take my phone. If anyone calls, just tell them I'm sleeping, unless it's a patient. And my mom did the best she could. I was sleeping and she came and tapped me. I had maybe just laid down for maybe 2 hours, an hour. She's like, "You have a patient. It's her second time calling." She said, "It's important that she speaks to you." So I literally had to get up and go to another labor. And it was so taxing. Um, it's but so much a cold shower can do. It's but so much, rolling down your windows and playing loud music. You really, 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 really have to get your rest. And so, but that was an unusual circumstance where, someone went into labor right after me coming home from another labor. So those are real life situations that not can occur. Let me just say right now, I'm here to tell you will occur. Those are situations that will occur. So that's why it's important to talk a lot about it. So you're prepared for it. So you can create systems where you can try and find balance and find ways to navigate through. The other area I wanted to talk about was navigating systemic barriers. Oh, so many as a midwife. I know you're probably saying why. So there are institutional challenges and systemic challenges, some of which are secondary to perception or the way in which they see or understand the profession of midwifery. Let's just be honest. So some people look at our profession as some archaic way of practicing medicine, which it's really the oldest, I want to say, profession, one of the oldest professions in American history and really universally, internationally. Um, so, but it is perception. So that creates systemic barriers because some people don't believe in our profession, and it is a legitimate profession. um so what am I speaking to? For example, here's an easy one. When I first started my own practice independent, it was very difficult for me to get an account to I want to say sustain or open a laboratory account. Why would I need a laboratory account? Well, you will have to draw labs, you have to draw blood, you have to, order prenatal labs and uh, pap smears, and you want to know the blood type, and you want to make sure your client doesn't have sickle cell disease. So you need to have an account with LabCorp or Quest or whoever is the leading laboratory in your area. And initially, they wouldn't allow us to unless we got a letter from a doctor. And so, why would that be a barrier? Well, it was very difficult to find a doctor who was willing to sign off on that because they kept thinking that, oh my God, if I sign off on this, that makes me liable. And it didn't. It's just a policy that the laboratory company created. And they created it out of, I want to say, ignorance or fear. There was no need to have a doctor sign off on our account because we were independent and still are independent practitioners. In most states, you can practice without a collaborative agreement. No need, unless, of course, that state they that's an issue for them. But here in North Carolina, we can, New York, New Jersey, and many other states. So that was a barrier and a big one. Um, but then the doors started opening because a lot more midwives were requesting an account from LabCorp, an account from Quest. But then I think it was one lab, like in North Carolina, when all the other leading and well-known labs wouldn't open an account for us unless we had a doctor give us a letter of some kind. There was one lab that would. So then it became competitive. They needed to compete with this other lab, and then they started opening the door. So that was hard. And another barrier was these medical supply companies. You need supplies. You need a place where you can order your Doppler. You need a place where you can order your scale, order speculums, order um, oxygen tank, ambu bag, medication. You needed a supply company, and a lot of them wouldn't because they wanted us to have a doctor to sign off on. They didn't trust that we had a DEA license, we had an MPI, we had the same requirements that are, needed to write a prescription, and they wouldn't let us have an account with them. Well, that was a barrier way back when I first started. So the doors are really open for a lot of the midwives who are coming through today and graduating today. They didn't have to fight as hard as we did. A lot of what I'm complaining about is something that the newer midwives are not faced with. They can easily open a laboratory account with LabCorp or Quest. They can easily open an account with Henry Schein or McKeeson, or Precious Arrow. Precious Arrow is one who never ever gave pushback. They actually offer, their supplies are midwifery, I want to say, focused. And so thank God and kudos to Precious Arrow. So those were some barriers, and we call those systemic barriers. Navigating through those were very difficult. But when one midwife found a doctor who would, they would share their name, and then the doctor, sometimes he charged something for it. But we also had an issue when we first started, at least when I first started, I needed to have a collaborative agreement. So that was difficult. That is a systemic barrier, and it was a restraint of trade, really considered a restraint of trade, because we needed to get a physician to agree to allow us to practice under their name or under their practice. And it was challenging because a lot of doctors saw us as competition and they wouldn't sign off. So one of the things that made it easy was when one physician would, that physician probably signed off on maybe 4 or 5 other. And sometimes they charged, but a lot of times back there they didn't. That's a new aged, I want to say, uh, thing that developed over time where the physician charges the midwife for having a collaborative agreement. Because way back when I started, and I started in the 1990s, before some of you were born, um, started midwifery, but I started practicing medicine in the 80s. So I know that some people want to throw shade on, I want to say, fund of knowledge or experience. I was practicing before half the people who have negative things to say about me or my practice before they were born. So it's really interesting. But you try and overcome those negative, rumors. I had a couple of items that I wanted to make sure that I covered. So that's why I have my, uh, notes here. Um, so I wanted to make sure that I covered the hard spaces that are not really discussed in traditional midwifery schools, which were the emotional challenge, and the physical demands, and also those systemic barriers. And those systemic barriers sometimes are known as gatekeeping systems. So we talked a little about burnout. We talked a lot about the demand emotionally and the demand physically. Again, it's a 24/7 on call lifestyle for a while until you figure it out. Some people hire another midwife, or there's a practice of two or more midwives, which makes it easier, in terms of the physical demand and emotional demand as well. But one of the things that we talk a lot about at a Woman's Way Warrior Midwife training is how to create the tools to help you navigate those kinds of spaces, the systemic barrier spaces, and also the emotional and physical demand. It's important to talk about it so that we create the right types of tool and supportive system. Um, and I was just sharing a story For me, when I first started out, creating or really identifying a laboratory account was very challenging because they required a physician to write a letter. And you needed a collaborative practice agreement. And so those requirements for most states now are not needed to practice. If you're just now joining me, I am midwife Sakina Oyuhuru, and I've been practicing the art of midwifery for almost 30 years now. And I'm on tonight just sharing some, I want to say, areas that are not traditionally talked about during a midwifery school, where we spend a lot more time. And in particular, one of, I want to say, our founding tenets, or one of the most important fundamental components of our program, is the sisterhood. We speak a lot about how important it is to create these types of relationships as a student so that when you're in practice, you have other sister midwives you can depend on, because there will be a time when two people go into labor at the same time. There will be a time when you need someone to run and go check someone when you're at a labor or you're just finishing up one. And two people do go into labor. Not all the time. It's rare, but it can happen. And really developing those strong relationships with other midwives in your area. You have to build community relationships with other birth workers. It's really important. They can help support you and help you sustain more emotional and mental balance in your practice. So, we were talking about navigating those systemic barriers and institutional challenges. We talked a little bit about licensure and the legal battles, depending on what state you live in. Thank God midwifery is legal in the state of New York and New Jersey. It is legal in the state of North Carolina for most midwives, but for CPMs, we still do not have a legal process by which CPMs can practice. We're working on it right now as we speak. And hopefully it will pass both houses this year, and we will create another licensing process for CPMs to practice. And the reason why it's so important is we want to make midwifery accessible and available to all women in North Carolina. Every birthing person should be allowed to choose their provider and their setting. What provider they feel more connected with. Is it a CPM or is it a certified nurse midwife? And so all birthing people, couples, women should be allowed to choose whichever birthing setting aligns with their value system, be it at home, at a birth center, a birth house, or in the hospital. It's your choice. And you need to figure out what resonates more with you? What's more aligned with your value system and your desire? What type of outcome do you want? Or think about how you want your labor to unfold or transform. What would you like to do during your labor? Would you like to dance? Would you like to walk around? Would you like to eat? Who do you want at your labor? So I think when you think about those variables, that will help you decide which setting is best for you. Do you want to eat? Do you want to have drumming? Do you want to have incense burning? Do you want to have prayer or vicar? It's all about you. It's all about what you feel supports you best. So, getting back to navigating systemic barriers and institutional challenges, I wanted to speak a little bit about the medical system sometimes pushes back, particularly in areas when you have to transfer the client. Let's say you are a community based midwife and you're doing home births, and this client no longer is safe to stay at home or becomes high risk, no longer a home birth client. You want to have a very seamless transport, all right, or process where you can transfer your client without a lot of pushback, because your focus is on the well-being of your mother and your baby. So you want to have a system where you can transfer this client without pushback, violence, and without scrutiny. You want to be able to advocate for her all the way until she has her baby. So there are a lot of struggles in that space. And knowing that in this transfer, the client will no longer have full autonomy, which is something you guys planned for and something that you offered in your practice. So that could be very difficult and challenging, not only for the client but for you as well. When I talked about that mourning process of both the laboring client as well as the practitioner and anybody else who's present in that space. If you have to transfer, that is a mourning process. It's kind of like a loss. It's a new challenge because you didn't plan for it. And so, do we create spaces to process that loss? And I don't think that we're creating enough spaces for birth workers, particularly midwives and doulas, etc., to release that, to process that, because it can be very challenging. And then create the space for the client to process. When they come back to you, or you go visit them at the hospital, or they come back to you postpartally, talking about that process and how difficult or challenging it may have been, and what kind of emotions came up for them in that transfer. How were they treated? Were they able to let go? It's a lot. And I think we don't talk enough about it, and we don't create the space so that we all can process it separately and then process it together. So, if you're just now joining and you have a question about midwifery pathways, about the realities in those areas that are not talked enough about, you certainly can put it in the chat and I'll certainly try and address it. Again, I'm Midwife Sakina Oyuhuru, and I founded a program called A Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training. And our curriculum is a 2-year program where we train individuals and prepare them to become community based midwives. And also, we prepare them to sit for the NARM board exam. So, if you want to become a traditional midwife, you can still apply and attend our program. If you want to become a certified professional midwife, you certainly can attend our program. We're accepting applications now. You can go to our website, a woman's way word midwife training.com. The process is quite simple. 2 letters of recommendation, an essay, and the application. And then we schedule your interview to see if we're aligned. We're only accepting a small cohort. Last year we had 10. This year we really do not want to have more than like 6 individuals. We already accepted 3. So we have like 3 seats left. If anyone's interested, you certainly can go to the website and apply. Want us to talk a little bit about race and equity issues, and how Black midwives in particular face systemic racism, particularly through the NARM exam and credentialing. Lots of roadblocks and financial limitations. And so, one of the things that we have done in our program is offer partial scholarships. I would love to be able to offer full scholarships, but at this time, we are now offering partial scholarships. And we actually try and give it to every single applicant, not applicant, but enrollee. So our partial scholarships, um, when applied, each enrollee only pays $5,000 a year, and that's now the tuition is going up. So right now it is 7,500. Our scholarships, after we apply the scholarship, the students are responsible for 5,000 per year every year for 2 years, and we do have partial payment plans. Excuse me a minute, I need to take a drink. Sorry about that, but my throat is really dry. So before we end tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about um, some of the areas that is not discussed in traditional midwifery schools. Again, I'm Midwife Sakina Oyuhuru, and tonight the topic is about the realities of midwifery and what they don't teach you in school. And so one of the hard places I think is the emotional and physical demands of midwifery. And too often, I think students and individuals who embark upon this journey, unbeknown to them, really do not have a clue as to how much emotional and physical demand it requires long hours of being on call 24/7, missed meals, sleep deprivation, and sometimes having to physically um, just be strong during a labor, even though you are exhausted. And sometimes you might sleep an hour or 2 hours and then someone else calls and they're in labor. So the physical demands can lead to burnout, and that's emotionally as well as physically. So one of the things that's important is to talk about it, number one, so that we normalize that part of midwifery. I'm not saying that there aren't any wonderful, happy, joyous occasions, but I think bringing the realities to what it is to being a midwife is really important as well. And I had some notes and I wanted to make sure that we talked about physical demands and burnout and just being really aware of the signs of fatigue, recognizing it and then learning how to create healthy boundaries for yourself, for self care, as well as family time, you know. We also talked a little bit about navigating systemic racism, systemic barriers, and I gave some examples of some of the barriers that I encountered in terms of needing a physician collaborative agreement, which is really not needed in most states now. We've come a long way and we fought long and hard to get those overturned and changed. One of the other areas was obtaining an account with laboratories was also a challenge back in the day, and also obtaining an account with some of the medical supply companies like Henry Schein, like McKesson, so now there are many options. Number one, Precious Arrow really caters to midwives. Thank God for them, um, because the market was horrible, and they behaved horribly towards midwives who were really just trying to become a customer and to add something to their bottom line. But they really made it very difficult and required us to have a physician to countersign or some collaborative agreement. So I'm glad that is no longer a requirement, but some laboratories still do. Some laboratories still do. And also just navigating the space. Some Black midwives find it very difficult in some spaces to acquire clients. Some Black midwives and students complain about not really having compassionate clinical preceptors, and their experience has been one where they experience racist remarks. And so, there are equity issues in the midwifery space. And I do remember a couple of midwives having issues around credentialing in terms of passing the NARM exam. And so, those are some roadblocks that I'm not sure we have gotten over. Um, and so, right now, I want to say we only have one school that is Meek accredited. And I'm hoping soon to hear from Meek because we submitted our application and hopefully we will become Meek accredited as well. We're looking forward to it. It's overdue. Um, so, the other areas that I feel are, well, I want to say, I don't know if it's is if it's a um, a challenge or not, but some of my biggest wins, I want to talk about wins instead of challenges, um, was birthing my grandchildren. I had the wonderful opportunity to support my son's children. Two of them were birthed in my home when I lived in New Jersey. And so I want to say those two were big wins for me. Um, Big wins in terms of ancestral blessings and just being a part of such a sacred work, So I love that I was a part of their birth and I'm really close to them. So that was a really big win. One huge challenge I want to say was in New York when I had someone who was hemorrhaging. That was a hard one. Um, Luckily, we got her to the hospital in time, but it still was challenging navigating starting the IV, navigating giving Pitocin, navigating calling 911, and navigating being there and seeing how slow they were moving. That was hard. Woo, that was hard. So I was in the ambulance with her in New York and New Jersey. Actually, let me see. Was it? Yeah. A lot of times we were in the ambulance if we needed to be in the ambulance, if they let us. Um, so I remember that was hard, man. It was hard because people weren't listening. And when I was like, I think she might be going into shock, and I was trying to be in control and not out of sorts, but be very forceful and very clear. Um, and so much so that I was begging people. I was like, please, please, you got to get her upstairs. Fortunately, one of the OBs happened to come down to the ER, and I was like, she's going into shock, and we need to move her fast. And that was when things picked up. I won't say what hospital it was, but it was so horrible. Um, but luckily she was, they started IVs, gave her blood transfusion, and she was so grateful. And I went back to see her the next day. We did the postpartum in her home a couple of weeks later, I believe. But they gave the father such a hard way to go because the father had the baby and took the baby home, and the police came to the door like, you have to bring the baby back, like he did something wrong. It was so weird. New York is really out of control. So that was a hard, challenging birth for me. I was just sharing some biggest wins, some big and biggest challenges. That was one of the biggest challenge for me. Um, yeah, because that's the one that just comes to mind. And I've never ever had anyone say to me, Sakina, not really thinking I really can't see you that well. It's getting dark. So that was really scary and challenging because nobody would listen. It was like, EMS, can you just move faster and get to the ER? Can you guys please listen and get my client up to the floor? So those are lessons that I learned to run my practice differently. Like every single encounter and every single client and couple will teach you lessons about yourself, moreover than anything else, and also help you, I want to say, reestablish, change, transfer, or just do things differently. Add something, take away. And those are great. Those are the hardest to me, the hardest encounters were the greatest lessons, you know. Um and so those are the ones that come to mind. Let me see what was another challenging one. That one was the most. Oh, breach. undiagnosed breech, which happens to every single provider in reproductive health, maternal health practitioner. You will have a breech. And after that one, you probably won't have another one. That one was difficult. Because who wants to miss a breach? Nobody. Um, Also challenging is how you're received in the hospital after you transfer or while you're transferring. Some of the most hostile situations occurred in New York and New Jersey. Sorry to say, and I'm not going to hold my tongue on it. In North Carolina, it became much more peaceful. They weren't so hostile and vicious, like going to an inquisition. You always felt like that. Oh my, I'm going to battle. Um, it taught you how to fight and also how to find your voice, when to use your voice, when to use your power. But there was a lot of violence, not only to the birthing person, but towards the midwife. So much violence. And that was from nurses, doctors, and other midwives who looked like me and who didn't look like me. Listen, I was there and I was subjected to that kind of violence and abuse. Violence and abuse. It was very challenging. I want to say that was the most challenging was that. And you will actually get anxiety or hyperventilate if you had to transfer, even in the phone call. The report that you were given, depending on who was on the other end, could be violent towards you and disrespectful, um, and debasing. So that it was a lot of that disqualifying you and not validating you. Now, some midwives who didn't look like me, who were Caucasian midwives, let me just be honest, did not, were not treated like that. I'm not saying across the board, but I'm saying when I shared this with some of my midwife friends, some of them said, no, no one ever talked to me like that. No, no. But most of us were violated, particularly if you were a Black midwife. Now, I'm just being honest, whether you guys want to hear this or not. Um, yeah, we can give some horror stories. Mistreated, extremely. But midwives, I want to say, as a profession, yes, they have been very, I want to say, unprofessional towards us and made us feel very unwelcome during those transitions across the board, whether you were Black or white. I just feel like, and I'm just not talking out my ass, this is lived experiences, that a lot of the Black midwives complained that it happened more so to them than their sister midwives, Caucasian midwives. And that's unfortunate. It shouldn't happen at all, number one. So, one of the other important points I want to talk a little bit about before I end is mentoring. Mentoring is really important. It's really important to be supported by someone who's been in the business longer than you. They can give you a wealth of information, a wealth of sharing, things that will help you and prevent you from, falling prey to some of the things that I shared tonight. Really, really identify someone that you connect with, who's aligned with your philosophy or vice versa, so they can share those realities and how to prepare for success. So mentorship is really important. Find a strong midwifery network. And so that is the one of the focal points of a woman's wayward midwife training. We really believe in building sisterhood, not only building the sisterhood, but helping you build character, helping you build yourself up for this journey. It's a huge undertaking, emotionally, mentally, and physically. So, identifying a strong network or a mentor or midwife who've been on the earth longer than you and who's been in this space longer than you can help you in terms of developing and creating and founding your business. You know, just some things that you might not have to go through that we went through to prevent that and to help you sustain your practice. You know, talk about pricing, talk about funding, talk about how to run your practice. So, you know, find yourself a mentor. Find yourself a mentor. Um, our practice offers mentoring, and I certainly will give you the link. I'm going to share it. Where is it? I'm going to, I'm going to, okay, come on. I'm going to share it in the chat, the link to my mentoring program. We actually have 30-minute mentoring sessions that you can book, and we also have 1 hour. So I'm going to copy the link and share it. This one is for the 30-minute one. And this is for not only for student midwives, it's for anyone who's thinking about becoming a midwife, a doula, a birth worker. You don't even have to be any of the above. You're thinking about it and you want mentorship, you want advice. If you're a lactation consultant, you're a birth assistant, birth work, thinking about supporting women, thinking about this journey, this birth work journey. You're an advocate, a reproductive advocate, right? So, or justice advocate, activist, abolitionist, and you want some support around this space. You certainly can copy the link and book a session or two. And I'd be happy to give advice, to share, redirect, support, and become a mentor. Identify someone who you feel is aligned with your philosophy. And I cannot speak to how important it is. I can't speak enough about it, is what I'm trying to say. It's invaluable to identify a mentor on this journey, right? So they can share with you some of their lessons so you don't have to fall prey to it. And they can help you direct you in the right way so you can build a successful practice. So you can build a successful practice, the business side of midwifery, pricing and running your business, running your practice, and just giving you practical wisdom. There's something about being a nana. There's something about being an elder. There's something about sitting at the feet of an elder who's been in this space a long time. There is lots of experiential sharing, lived experience sharing, and wisdom that you can garner. So I recommend you copy the link and book your mentoring session, no matter where you are on this journey, even if it's a thought, you know, even if you haven't, you know, if you're not even a student and you're just thinking about it, it's a place to start. So if you're just now joining us, I am Midwife Sakina O. Uhuru. I am a certified nurse midwife and also a certified professional midwife. My practice, Gentle Spirit Home Birth Midwifery Service, although we've taken a transition, we're going in a different direction now. We're focusing on mentoring, trainings, webinars, and well woman care. So we're still offering well woman care, less of home birth, and we have a wealth of information to share. And we certainly want to open our space up to those who want to hear and receive. So I have shared the links in in the chat in terms of how to book a mentoring session, as well as where to go for the application if you're interested in becoming a midwife, and also booking a 30-minute session or an hour session for anyone who is interested in being mentored. Um, Very important work that we're doing. It requires a lot of support that you can create or that already exists in your community, in your family, amongst your friends. And you may have to nurture those relationships so they can support you in the way that you need them to. The same thing that we advice we give to our clients and our patients, the support that they need from us. Listen to them so that you can hear the type of support that they're asking for. Of course, you can give advice about the support you think they need, but more importantly, is it the support that they want? How do they want you to support them? Do they want hands off? Do they want you to um, come at a certain hour, not when you think you should be there? Do they want you to be quiet? No lights? Do they want you not to examine them and not to tell them when to push? Do you want them to allow you to meditate? You know, it's important to know how clients want to be supported. Some people are not used to midwifery led support, and it really varies depending on the practice. And I really try and allow my clients to lead with that because it's very individualized. Some clients want you to massage a lot, hold them, talk. So I had some clients. I was like, Sakina, I really need you to be very directive. They wanted me to talk and tell them what to do and not to do. Then I had some clients that are like, please don't talk. Please don't talk. Please don't touch. Don't talk. Don't touch. So you have to wait for the cues, listen for the cues, and wait for them. I think I want to, and they just start, are you pushing? So you have to wait for the cues, listen for the cues. You know, some people don't want to be directed, so you don't direct. Um, but it's really tailored to each client's needs. It's so important to know that. This is not dogmatic, like at the hospital. Everyone gets put on the monitor. Everybody gets an IV. Everyone who's 24 hours ruptured gets it. That's not home birth midwifery. And so if that's what you're looking for as a client, you need to go to the hospital. And we need to really, 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 really be transparent and know what you want. Know thyself. Know thyself. And stop thinking you could transform the midwife into being a hospital or a home birth midwife into being a hospital patient. That doesn't go. But some people want that. Some people really want a midwife that behaves like a midwife, a hospital based midwife. It's a different way of supporting women. Some clients are not used to quiet midwives. It's like our presence there is powerful. And so sometimes we're listening for the cues. We're listening to you to direct us. We're listening to you. And so we ask you questions so that we can direct you best, just like a doctor. And you go into the doctor's office, rather. So we listen to you. It's listening a lot and waiting, listening, waiting. And so, you when you are interviewing your midwife or midwife practice, you need to interview and ask what kind of midwife they are. Talk to me about who you are. How much experience you have in this out of hospital setting? Are you a very frightened midwife, timid midwife, need a lot of people around, don't need a lot of people around? Are you afraid of birth? Do things scare you and get you out of sorts? Do you feel like you got to rush through this process? You guys are not asking the right questions. Ask the right questions so you get the right midwife. And there's no blaming and none of that. Ask the right questions. And in the process of learning one another, if you find it is not working, opt out. You know what you're getting into. When you find it's not working, it's okay to say, I don't think this is working anymore. You can't change people. Know who you getting into bed with or who you bringing home since they come into your home. Got to ask the right questions and stop thinking you can transform somebody. When they say they don't have a lot of experience at home, they telling you the truth. So it's up to you to decide whether that resonates with you. Are you comfortable with that? Or if they say they're a hands-off midwife, are you comfortable with a hands-off midwife? Because some of you guys out there think the midwife's supposed to be doing something to you every second. That's not what home birth is about. This is going to unfold whether she's doing something or not. So that's why it's important to talk about this process. The midwife don't need to be doing anything except monitoring your vital signs when she's supposed to, or according to her protocols or her practice guidelines. But sometimes it's sitting quietly. That's what families and couples need to understand before they get into this journey. Finding the right midwife that resonates with you, that's aligned with your philosophy. If you want somebody that's doing something all the time, then you got to find that kind of midwife. Got to find that kind of midwife. If you want a midwife that's hands off, you got to find that kind of midwife and don't complain in the end. Do your due diligence. Do your due diligence. It's a partnership. You have to do some of the work. And I know that's kind of hard to hear sometimes, but it's part of it because we're doing ours. The midwife need to do their due diligence too and stop chasing money. Make sure that the client is aligned with your practice philosophy. Stop taking every and anyone because maybe that client is for another midwife. You will get someone to replace that. So make sure you're accepting the right kinds of clients that are aligned with your practice philosophy. And I'm going to end on that because I'm giving a lot of jewels away. That's what this live was about. Some of the realities and things that are not really talked about in the traditional midwifery schools. And I'm not knocking them. I'm just letting you guys know that that's what is discussed at a Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training Program. And if you want to know a little bit more about it, go to our website, A Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training.com. Or you can go to our TikTok, Warrior Midwife or Gentle Spirit Birth or A Woman's Way on Instagram. And I will put that in the chat right now in case you guys are still on with me. That's Instagram. Oops, Instagram. At right there you go. Oop. Did I do that? Yeah. And let's see what else. Did I go over all the points? And I also wanted to give you the Instagram handle for where are we? Come on, girl. A Woman's Way. I already said that. Oh. No, there was another handle I wanted to give you from TikTok. If you're still on with me. Uh-oh. At Warrior Midwife Training. So that is my challenge. Remember my handles. At Warrior Midwife Training. Right? That's it. TikTok. So if you're just now joining me, we are live and we're getting ready to go to say goodnight. Tonight we were just talking about, I want to say, topics that are not always discussed during traditional midwife educational programs, and just encouraging those who are interested in embarking on this midwifery journey to head on over to A Woman's Way Warrior Midwife Training.com and apply The application process is simple. Two letters of recommendation, an essay, and the application, and then we schedule your interview. So again, thank you for joining us. Hope you garnered something from this live discussion. We'll be back next week. All right. Have a great evening. Ciao.